Alright guys, let's talk about how I shot this video with fake blood with only 2 budget lights in my kitchen. Let's go. I went for an orange and teal look with the exact same film stock, the Kodak Vision 350D they used in Jurassic World Rebirth. But before we get into that, let's talk about the lighting setup first. It will definitely surprise you how easy that was. So the whole sequence was shot in my kitchen, which is a really small place as you can clearly see here. I started off with an edge light, which kind of set the mood for the scene and simulates a flickering halogen lamp. I used an ampered full A2 light tube and positioned it right behind the Molton. That way, I don't have any problems removing the background later. I set it to 5600 Kelvin, so really cold and bluish. That did 2 things. It gave me the cold thriller movie vibe with that subtle flicker of the lamp, and it also outlined my silhouette with a sharp blue edge, which is perfect for the contrasty orange and teal look that I will apply later in color grading. Then came the key light. I used a small rig RC60B, double diffused it with this thing here, which is actually supposed to be a wrapper for I don't know what gear, but it works just fine and it makes the light really soft on my skin. I positioned the light 45 degrees to the side of me and top down, so that we have this typical Rembrandt lighting. I set it to 3200 Kelvin, so the skin tones are really warm compared to the cold blue edge light. You can already see the contrast here, even before color grading. What made another big difference in the lighting setup was the reflector. I positioned it to the side of me and clamped it to the stool to bounce the light right back into the shadow side of my face. Not too much, just enough to lift the shadows and reflect some of that blue edge light back in. Without it, the shot feels moodier, as you can see here, which is not wrong, but I like to give the image a little more realism in this case. That tiny change made the lighting feel more motivated, like there's an actual ceiling light in the scene or somewhere outside of the frame. Now, here you can see the full setup. 1 stool, 1 key light, 1 flickering light tube behind the curtain, 1 cheap reflector, and 1 background I'll remove later. Literally anyone, even with a small space, can pull that off. You just gotta try it. So before we get into the main part, the Jurassic World Rebirth kind of color grade, let me quickly show you how I prepared myself with makeup and styling. So to really sell the hostage look, I needed to look dirty and sweaty and beaten up. For that, I applied some hair oil on my face because it just lasts longer than water and actually looks like oily, greasy sweat. I then used hairspray for the wet hair look and of course, fake blood on my nose and temple. And as a finishing touch, I rubbed my white t-shirt in some garden soil to make it look really used and dirty. I even put some dirt in my face as well. Now what brings the whole thing together and makes it feel like actual film are the colors. The goal, again, was a classic orange and teal blockbuster style. Here's the quick step-by-step workflow. First, we of course need to convert the log footage into Rec 709. Then, I applied DEHANCER Pro with the Kodak Vision 350D film stock. Next, I adjusted the expand tool to add some more contrast and higher black levels. I then chose Kodak 2383 as the film print because it adds more subtle warmth in the highs and mids and gives more contrast in a very filmic way. To make it even filmier, I of course added some film grain and went heavy in the shadows but not in the mids and highlights, which to me is the most realistic. And to really enhance the typical film stock vibe, I turned on halation and bloom for glowing highlights and edges. As a finishing touch in DEHANCER, I enabled the vignette for more focus on the subject, in this case me. Then I proceeded to the final cut color tools. Oh, and by the way, of course, everything I do here can also be done in DaVinci Resolve or Adobe Premiere. So I added an overall green tint with -16 to get away from these reddish skin tones and highlights on the shirt. And I went even further by going into the color adjustments, where I specifically pushed the highlights to warmer tones and again added some more green tint. It looks really filmic already and I like it a lot, but stick with me, there's more. I gave the image an additional vignette for more contrast and moodiness on the edges. I could have done that in DEHANCER again, but I like layering the different grades in the color process. What in the world is this? So, once the look was set, I needed to cut myself out, in this case remove the black background and replace it with a cool ambient shot. So I went on Artlist and found this abandoned hallway stock footage with a random guy walking in. So I would say what a coincidence with me being a hostage. So that worked perfectly, especially with the dark mood. I just needed to resize and reposition it to match it with my shot. And of course, I did that for each other angle as well. Then I adjusted the blur and the sharpness so the background always fits the depth of field of the respective shot. Sometimes I even blurred myself out to simulate that focus shift. In my opinion, it just gives the whole scene more variation. You might have noticed in the sequence that I placed myself more to the right, and that's on purpose. It's called rule of thirds and it just creates more visual interest to the scene. Also, I shot most angles really close and slightly top down to make the character feel really helpless. Always, of course, filming it from the shadow side to keep it cinematic. And yes, I know there's a gap at the top, but I added a letterbox anyway, so that was not a problem. There was just one thing left: really matching colors of the two shots to blend everything together. So I went and put the overall temperature even more into the yellows and then shifted the blues slightly more towards teal. I then slightly reduced the blue saturation in the hue versus sat curves that in the end merged me, the rotoscope Constantine, and the background really nicely together. Lastly, I added some overall blur. It's barely noticeable, but it removes that digital sharpness and makes it a little nicer to the naked eye. And if you're like me and you like exporting your project in a cinema aspect ratio, there's always room for your 4K footage to make it look anamorphic and therefore even more film-like. Now, here's the trick how I faked an anamorphic look even without an anamorphic lens. You just need to go ahead and scale your Y-axis down unproportionally to your X-axis. In this case, I pushed it down to 98%, which gives the image that wider feeling, just like Hollywood blockbusters. Something that really levels up your footage in my opinion. As a final touch to everything, I added a handheld camera shake to the shots, to make it feel more chaotic and in the moment. I then matched all the shots across the sequence and adjusted background positioning where needed. I think if you look at this, it's quite amazing what you can achieve in post-production with a set this small. I even revoiced the whole thing in post because I forgot to record my sound. And my body took a bit of a hit as well. Those tapes were pretty rough on my skin and the fake blood really wouldn't come off even after hours of washing them with soap. But honestly, it was worth it. This was one of the most fun micro-productions I've done recently. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, let me know what kind of scene I should recreate next. Anyways, I guess I'll see you in the next one. Peace.